Of course, we've seen all these afternoon rains, plenty of sunshine, great for the cane. Wondering how it's affecting everything on y'all end.
I guess, Derek, to really answer that question, I have to back up a little bit. We were chugging along in, I guess, August of 17, and we were spared. Hurricane Harvey didn't hit us.
Right.
But Hurricane Harvey brought a bunch of rain to us. We got, over a weekend, like in some areas close to 10 inches of rain.
Right.
And so what I'm noticing is, so we had some guys like Friday morning, they were planting, and by Friday afternoon it started raining, and by Saturday morning that cane, it went underwater and stayed underwater. All right, then we had fairly good weather after that until, if you remember, we had a little cool spell around Thanksgiving. Then it got really cold around Christmas and New Year's, a freeze, and then 2 more freezes depending on if your cane was cut or not in January.
Right.
Some people were finished. So the cane that suffered at planting due to that excessive rain, all the other cane went through those other weather conditions unless it was cut before the late January, the freezes after the first. The cane has been through a lot. Then we had the dry spring.
Right.
So that, on the one hand, allowed the cane farmers to work a bunch of ground to get all their, they went in there and they did all their off-born, they did all their fertilizing, they did all their spraying, and got through done lay-by, and we weren't caught in that situation. But because of you can't say erratic weather, because I don't know if there is typical weather in Louisiana.
Yeah,
typical weather pattern in Louisiana is going to be erratic, but the extremes,
right?
The real cold, then the drought, or not drought, but the very dry conditions. It's just the cane is not. I think we have a good crop. I think I think we've got some good fields, but we have those fields that were stressed. The stubble, the older stubble that's stressed, and then we have some varieties that stressed.
Sure.
That cane's a little weak. And the big thing we look at, we want to be going through a grand growth period. Cane likes hot, humid, rainy days. So a day like today where the sun was out, then we got the rain. What we don't need is overcast days, and we don't need another dry month. We need to catch up on our rainfall because we want the cane to get to a good height by the end of this month. So by August, we can start planting, and we need good height to have good joints, because at all those joints, that's where when we lay that cane down, the taller that section, the taller that stalk of cane is, the more growth nodes it's going to have, and that's where it's going to send those shoots up.
Sure.
So that's what our big concern is, and we know we had one of the best crops we ever had in 17, and 16 was no slouch either.
Right.
So we may not have the kind of yield numbers in 18 that we had in 17, but 17 was a phenomenal year. We had good tonnage, and we had good recoverable sugar, which gave us a fantastic pounds of sugar per acre year.
Sure.
So you hear we have a dry year, but it was a good recoverable sugar year.
Right.
17 was good in both. We had good tonnage and good recoverable sugar. This year, I think the feeling right now is it's too early to tell, but it's going to be hard to match last year. But if you look at a 5-year or 10-year average, we have a very good chance of hitting those marks.
Right.
So that's the biggest concern with the cane, is that it just needs some moisture, and we've been getting it. And we're fortunate that they record growth in Generette at the Iberia Research Station and at the USDA Sugarcane Research Station in Houma. A little bit south of us. And all of that is showing that when we got the rain, the cane took off. And if we can continue it to stay on that growth curve, we're fairly optimistic that, we're going to have good planting ratios. We need to be in that 5 to 7 ratio, 7 to 8. 1 acre of cane planting, 5 to 8 acres of cane and we need height for that.
Sure.
And then it's way too early to tell on will we have tonnage and sugar, but the crop is not, it's only down slightly. All of our beans in this part of the world, all our soybeans are planted on fallow sugarcane ground, on sugarcane rows. And the same thing, the soybeans that were planted the right moisture came out of the ground well and are growing well. The soybeans that were planted where it was dry, they're struggling and they're not getting high, and they want to set pods. So when they start setting pods when they're short, that usually tells us their yield potential is not going to reach its full potential, and it makes them a little more difficult to cut. So soybean yields could be down a little bit. And then on the other, after you get out of sugarcane and soybeans, for us, our other, I guess, next biggest area of agriculture is our livestock and our pastures.
Right.
Our guys are prepared. Their cattle, 99% of them, they can get their cattle to some kind of shaded area. They've got some kind of water, but our pastures, man, they just didn't get enough water. They came through a rough winter, so our ryegrass was late, and then it didn't get any rain, so that hurt. And then you should be feeding ryegrass, and then by the time the ryegrass is done, you should be able to get your spring and summer, perennials to get rolling. And without the rain, we had an unusual gap, and we had several producers that had to supplement with either feed or hay. Most of them tried to do hay. And if you go back again, Derek, to last year when we're trying to make hay in the spring and summer, we couldn't. It would just never stop raining. So we cut our hay when the pastures were kind of really over mature. Mm-hmm. And so we had an abundance. We had quantity, but we didn't have quality, because after grass gets to a certain point, it loses its quality. And we measure that on TDN, which is total digestible nutrients, and CP, crude protein. Right. That's, when those animals eat that hay, they take that in, and that's what helps them turn all that into, what they need to grow and make meat and milk and et cetera. So the hay that we are feeding is not all that good quality. And right now, when we've had the weather, in terms of dry weather conditions, to make hay, mm-hmm. we just haven't been having good yields because it's been so dry. So hopefully this rain helps us on, and depending on, some people might be calling their second cut, some people might be calling their third cut, depending on how they want to, if they made any rye. We had a few guys that made ryegrass hay, so that'll throw you off on your cut. But I would say on their summer cut, if this rain can help some pastures grow and develop, then we can catch some days where it's dry, and we can go and cut it, dry it, fluff it, and bale it. That should be a good, that should help out a lot too. So it's you still got to be very impressed with what we're able to producers are do, and they're dealing with Mother Nature the best they can. But I think our cane is going to be okay. I'm not saying we're going to have another banner crop. I think our soybeans,
it's still early for that.
Overall in the state, soybeans weren't. They were just right around average, and I think we'll look at that again this year with soybeans. And then, our livestock, our cattle numbers have actually kind of gone up. Several years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago, the prices were crazy good, and people just sold, and so our numbers went down. Since the prices went down, people have been retaining some of their. They got so far down, they didn't send as many calves to the stockyard to kind of rebuild their herds. Sure. And if we can get right with our pastures, I think we'll be okay there. And that's kind of in a nutshell what's going on there.
Excellent.
Our home gardens, Derek. Usually there's nothing you can do in South Louisiana when it rains every day. But when it doesn't rain, you can irrigate. So in a dry spring, our gardens usually do well, and people can fight off. We didn't have major insect infestations. That was kind of normal. So for the most part, I think our gardens did well until recently. It was coming. We started getting the heat, we started getting the rain, and it started affecting gardens. And I think a lot of people just said, "Look, I did pretty well. I'm probably just gonna shut things down." So people are kind of winding down their spring gardens and are gonna get ready for a summer or fall garden. What the fruit trees and the pecan trees and stuff like that are doing. But usually those trees need winter, so many days of below freezing to set in, to know that, it's winter, and then so many days after this, I can start, growing and having my spring time.
To rejuvenate that cycle. Yeah,
lemon or orange or those kind of trees don't do well is because we had such a mild winter. They were confused. They didn't know when to get going. But again, the stressful weather is going to have an effect on them. But next thing you know, blackberries, figs, will be coming